Welcome back. It's another ground up SCX24 chassis build. And as you can see here, I've got a lot of parts out in front of me. So hopefully we've got enough to jump into this. I've also got my Injora aluminum rock bouncer Mad Max build. So this guy is a little bit of the inspiration for this build. I think due to the popularity of it and the accessibility of the chassis and price point, it gave me the idea to do another Injora chassis. So this is their new carbon fiber, I guess, rock buggy. Not sure its exact name. So I'm gonna do it a little bit similar as far as the build, but a little bit different as well. So as you can see, this existing one has the top-loaded Komodo and the metal transmission. So it's got a lot of weight up high, and the frame is metal. Basically everything is metal on this. So it's been a little tuning struggle to get the weight down low, and you can see I've got limiting straps and high clearance links pulling it down. So on this one, I'm going to try to keep the chassis as light as I can keep it, and starting with carbon fiber is a good start. So I'll run through the parts here. I've got Furitek's Lizard Pro and Flysky's FSBS6 for the electronics. And then just due to the layout of this, it really made me struggle with any kind of forward mounted micro brushless motor. So I fell back on a standard mount 050 Torque Beast. I think that'll fit the chassis well. I've got Mofo's 30% overdrive and just typical OEM worm gears. Got the front weighted brass diff cover from Treal, full bearings, plastic axles. I've got Injora telescoping shocks and Kinetics very light pressure springs to give me that full droop. I've got Gladiator high clearance links from Injora. I've got their brass steering links and metal Gladiator drive shafts. I've got Samix brass servo tray and Mofo's black label servo. Again, a little more front weight with brass knuckles and brass ring Treal wheels. I've got the hex extenders. These are the kind of knockoff Millstone and Millstone Max outer rings, so I can tune those a little. I've got these sweet carbon fiber beadlock rings for the Treal wheels from Hardpark Rc that should be a nice touch with the frame. And then the cherry on top is the brand new Injora crawler tires. So these are like 62 millimeter. So another big boy on the market, and they look gnarly. So I thought this would be a great build to feature some massive tires, since this is a chassis only. Won't be any body clearance issues. So that's a quick look at it. We're gonna jump right in. Back with a little progress here. Got the axles together. One thing of note here on this, using the Samix tray, it doesn't raise the servo up as high, but you can still use that fourth hole. It's really close, and it basically touches the link, but it's as it's moving it, so they're both moving. If you put it on the third hole on this, it ends up, this link hits the box of the servo, because unlike the Emax, the whole box face is out front. So just something you need to know with the Mofos. When they're on his servo tray, they're up higher, and when you've got it on the fourth hole, you're actually perfectly parallel to that bottom link, and you can see this one tucks down just a hair, but I think it'll still work. And I always recommend assembling these off the truck so you can make sure there's no binding, everything moves freely. And in checking this and turning these lock to lock before I had the servo, I was getting kicking on one side. So I pulled out and investigated the dog bone, and I'll show you what I found. You can see one end is longer than the other, so it's in there off center. So I went and grabbed another one, a spare, and it was like that too. So I took a Dremel and just shortened one side down and evened it out with the other, and that got rid of any of the bucking at full lock. But again, another good reason to check these off the truck and manually just turn things by hand and make sure it's smooth. Also got a little butter grease in there. And then of course the rear went together, no issues. And you can see I've got the millstones on the rear, and then I've added the millstone max overweights to the front. And the overweights sit behind it, and since these don't have it, they come with a little brass collar. You can see there that sits behind it. Kind of takes up that space. But these axles are now ready to go, so I pulled out the chassis here, and you can kind of see it's got several plates and then crossbars and 1.5 millimeter hardware for those. And then it's got this external kind of cage piece that basically allows a little more width for the motor can and that cutout. So you could take this off as well, I'm sure, and not run it and have that more open. But looking at these slots here, the two at the front would be for this tray, which would have to be fully removed if I was running a forward mount micro motor. So that led me to using just the 050 can that would mount here, giving me this whole platform to use, and that way I can slide the battery more forward, so I can ride the battery kind of in this zone, put electronics back here potentially. So that's the game plan. I got to swap out the motor. I said I wasn't going to use any metal, but these are already metal, unfortunately, the little trays. So I had this left over, and since my Gladiator links have some little red balls, I figured good little highlights. So the shocks are red and black as well, and that's what led me to the red rims. And I would have gotten black rings, but I couldn't find them, and it doesn't matter since I'm swapping to the Hardpark rings. But that's the progress. So I'm going to go ahead and get a little more done here, get that transmission motor bolted up and all of these O-rings and balls in, and get those going, and then we'll be ready to kind of put all the pieces together. All right, back with a little update here. You can see a little progress on getting these links put together. Just a note here that'll make a lot of people happy. Injora is finally printing the text on opposite sides of the high clearance links, at least on these Gladiator links. So with anybody with OCD, yay. And for some reason they don't give you enough hardware. You can see I've only got 5 screws. You get plenty of extra O-rings and ball sockets. Luckily I've got sorted bags of hardware here, so it's something that you should have on hand if you're doing a build from scratch. A lot of times they give you the wrong hardware. You're also going to need a micro nut, which came with the brass Injora links, and you'll need that for one of the front upper link mounts that goes to the servo tray, because this Samix tray, only one of these tabs is threaded, so you're gonna have to back up one of those screws with a micro nut. But other than that, smooth sailing. I've got to get the rest of these O-rings, ball sockets on the shocks, get those assembled, and then we'll see where we are. All right, I said smooth sailing, and the rear was, but as I was bolting on this first link here, I remembered last time I four-linked this Samix tray, I encountered the same issue. So you can see there, the link is kind of bulky to the forward edge there, and it's hitting the back edge of the servo tray. So the center part of the servo tray is notched deeper for the 3-link. It actually goes under the servo. But the sides of the tray, you can see that edge. I just need to take a Dremel and deepen that, because that screw is already bound. It's at an angle right now. So that little bit of Dremel work solves it. So I'm going to pull this tray off, go in the garage and hit it with a Dremel, and we should be able to move forward. All right, got this tray modified, you can see there. So I basically took it down even or lower than that center portion. A little uneven there, one side's lower than the other, but as long as it clears the links. And then one other little thing I noticed that's super neat, never put 2 and 2 together. I was talking about how close this is, it's actually touching, and I was taking it apart, noticed this little tray notch. That's what that's for. It allows this to ride in there. So like I was saying, they can touch, they move together, they don't slide against each other, but that allows this to drop just a little bit lower. So that's just kind of a neat thing. I've never really put that together. I thought that was just a little piece of design, but there's actually a purpose to it. So just something to know, kind of cool. All right, so the servo's back in, links are on, and they are bound. So we are good with servo tray clearance, you can see there. But we are actually now touching the bottom edge of the back of the servo. So I can't remember what I did last time to remedy that. I could take a little plastic out of there off of that servo, or I could just space this forward with another spacer, which I think I'm gonna do, because right now, because of the one spacer, it's not sitting in that little trench anyways that's on the steering link. It's sitting on the edge of the link, so this will push it forward of the link, I think. So basically just taking that servo forward a hair will get it off of these links, and it will get the steering linkage just forward of that link. So I think ultimately, if this was a smaller servo, not as deep, it would sit perfect in this tray, and you wouldn't need spacers, and this link would be horizontal, or be parallel with the main link. But you know, that's why you check it as you go, a little bit at a time, and that's not acceptable right there. We need these moving. So we'll get that fixed, and we should be done with the links. Look at that, that's what you want. Free moving links. And you can see here, instead of adding another spacer, I just got a thicker plastic spacer, and that got the drag link right in front of the steering link. You can see right there, perfect. So I think we can mark axles as complete. Okay, back with a little update. I've got the motor in, and I've got it meshed up here where I've got a little bit of play, that spur. So we'll give it a little test here on the Lizard Pro. Seems to be working good. I'm gonna have to do a little break-in with it. And then for the steering, I've got my endpoints set up, and what's nice with this remote is you've got that adjustment. So first thing I do is come over to my dual rate for my steering with these powerful servos, and you can see I've cranked it down to 55%. So that's 55% of the throw in both directions, dual rate. So once I get that where it's not buzzing in either direction, so at 55, then I can come up to my endpoint adjustment. And so endpoint adjustment, you've got each side. So I've got my left and I've got my right. So I got my right at 103, I've got my left pumped way up. So you can adjust them each side to get all the way to your max throw without that servo overextending and buzzing. So when you're at max throw, the servo should be silent. If it's making a bunch of buzzing and chirping, it's trying to go throw too hard in one direction. So that's why it's so important to be able to set these up, and it's nice to have a nice radio that you can do that. If you put in these nice servos on stock electronics, you really don't have any way to do this kind of adjustment. The V2 electronics have this adjustment built in, but you can't use Furitek with it, but you could adjust your servo a little bit better on the V2. So anyways, everything appears to be functional. So I'm gonna see if we can't get both halves of these together, joined at the transmission, and get this thing looking like a buggy. Here we are. That looks like something, but it's not working. So I've been looking at this, and of course these Gladiator links kind of throw this buggy for a loop, and especially flipping them. So the shocks, these are telescoping, they're barely grabbing So there's you know, no forward compression, and that's also being hindered, you can see, by the drive shaft and this lower link here colliding. So it's not letting me really get much twist in that direction. I can get a little bit more, but again, not a lot, just due to just the overall geometry. You can see the body is tweaked. So if you set the body up straight. So I'm going to re-look at these links. So something shorter has to go up front for sure. And looking at this, what would be nice is if I had some trailing arms to come back and have the shocks come down like midway to those trailing arms. I think that would be a good setup. So I don't have any trailing arms, unfortunately, but I don't know. I do have a lot of different links, so I may be able to pull some out and figure out a game plan. I don't think I've got the colors. I don't think I have black. I'm gonna have red, but that's where we are. It's a little bit of discovery and just playing with the geometry a little bit. The other thing on the back with having this shorter link setup, you can see that 050 can and that upper link. So I basically have the shocks at one of their lowest positions, and they're fully compressed and they stop right at the can. So again, I'm not able to take advantage of anything up here because those links are so short and it's such an extreme angle. Plus, to add to that, they're high clearance. So if they weren't, they wouldn't have that kick up. So they would allow a little more clearance to anything there, which would be the drive shaft or the 050 can motor. So straight links may be a better way for something that's going to be really, really slammed. It's all really dependent on your motor, but that drive shaft up front could be an issue either way. But it's really all dependent on the links of your links and what that angle is going to be. But that's the story for now. So when we come back, maybe I will have some sort of way forward. Well, here we are. I got to a rolling chassis without swapping links, and I think I might end up being pretty happy with it. So the rear remained unchanged, so I've got full compression on the shocks right before I hit that 050 can motor. And in the front, I basically did a little brainstorming and looked in my parts bags, and I had a ton of servo horns. So I basically extended the shock mounts of the frame forward, and I have two mount points here backed up with micro nuts on the inside, and you can kind of see it across the other side there. And then I went ahead and found one of these aluminum brace bars, you know, from the aluminum rock bouncer kit, and used that to thread in between the shocks to basically brace those a little bit better. Have a couple of spacers in there to get everything evened out, and got good flex, good compression, no bind. My lower link and drive shaft do not hit on full compression. I've still got room to even go a little bit lower, so I could potentially take these, move the mount points back. I've still got one hole there, and of course on the front shocks I can just lean them, so I could get this sitting a little lower with those leaned back. But I think I'm going to wait till I get all the weight in there and get the electronics. And so of course you see I had to mock up some wheels and tires real quick. I already had these mounted. So these are on kinetic rims. These are mudslingers. And one thing I did find out with these knockoff kinetic millstone and millstone max, the millstones are a bigger diameter and the overweights are larger. A lot larger. These are the actual kinetic brand. So these overweights will not fit in the backside of Kinetic's rims. his will. And you can see that lip width difference. So something to know, if you buy kinetic rims and you try to buy knockoff Millstone Maxes, they're probably not going to work. You're going to have to get the original kinetics to go with his rims. But that's a moot point because those rims aren't going to go on here, which brings us to these rims. So I've got this Hardpark crawler carbon fiber ring out, and that thing looks sweet. And you can see here, I've got one mismatched piece of hardware. So I purchased the scale hardware with these rings. So you can see there that nice hex bolt. So that's one thing I'll be swapping in here, and it comes with a nice little tool for these guys. So this is the Treal hardware that's not going to get used. So that'll be a nice little piece of detail on those rings. So that's going to be a little bit of work and time to get those on. I just washed up these Injora tires to get any mold release off. They're nice and soft. The foams are really firm, which is maybe a good thing because the rubber really doesn't have any support. It's really floppy. So I may run these firms in the rear, and I may put something different in the front. I don't know. I may start with these, we'll see. But you can see size-wise, these are right here with a mudslinger. So I'll get them mounted up and we'll take a better comparison, get those on the truck and actually see how it says with 4 wheels on it. So we'll be back in a bit. Look at that, that just looks great. The scale hardware, the carbon fiber ring. That tire just looks nasty. So I've got them all 4 mounted up, and I've got a mudslinger out here sitting next to them. So I'm going to call these basically the same width, same height, and same nastiness. So these are actually sticky on the outside, very soft, and this is on a vented rim with its stock foam. So these guys are not necessarily sticky, they're very soft. This has stock foam and it's unvented. So I think that's going to work well for the rear to be a little firmer. And then on the front, I ended up cutting Crawler Innovations soft foams in half. I'll show a picture of that. So they're not as tall, but they're quite a bit wider and softer, so you can see that sidewall deflection versus the rear. It's a lot stiffer, but I think that's going to work great on the front. So yeah, that's the full slammed position right there as it sits. I have not adjusted the front shocks, and so that's kind of the stance sitting up. So the next challenge is going to be squeezing these 3 tiny little things into this one tiny little chassis. So I'm hoping I don't have to take one side of this off to do it, because these trays have tabs. You can't slide them in and mount them after the fact like the aluminum rock mounts are. So they have to kind of go in between the 2 chassis rails. So anyways, I've got an idea how I might lay this out, so I'm going to jump into it, and when I get back, maybe this will be running. We'll see. Well, I gave up. I wasn't able to get any electronics in this thing. Or was I? It looks like an antenna. So look at that. Pretty clean, if I do say so. So I'll show you what I did here in a second. Let me put this on a tripod. Okay, let's take a look at this. So you can see there's not much up top. So obviously I've got the Lizard Pro underneath the battery tray, and I've got it zip tied. You can see the short little ESC whip, and then the Bluetooth, and then this is the battery connection, comes up this little slot. And there's squares all on the bottom of that tray, so that gives you a lot of options to route. So you can see those coming up right here, all through one of these little squares. So I didn't have to use the extension whip for channel 2. I used that little short one. You can see the Bluetooth right back over there, and then the battery comes right up here. You can see from here, basically, you can slip the battery even forward, so you've got all of this space as an option for different batteries, and you've got this full height to the roof, which is nice. It's a lot taller than a lot of the chassis as far as battery space. And then you can see the servo. I didn't have enough slack to wrap everything, or the full bar, I guess, to cover everything there. So I really just wanted to get it up and kind of hide it along the profile. And then the battery sitting in here may just clamp it down, but it just rides here, slips under, and then it comes back up and plugs in here to channel 1. So pretty easy setup. Can't really see the electronics minus this one wire, but it really gives you a lot of options there. And then I've got, you can see I've got this kind of brick 3S, and then I've got a little extension for that. Then I've got the stock, and I also have a 3S that's about double thick, and it will fit up here as well. The nuts that back up these two screws kind of hinder it from sliding all the way forward, so if those weren't there, it would be able to slide forward. This little guy can slide as far forward as you want it. And this, I'll show you in a second, I'll hook up the 3S. It pinches right in there to the top of the roof, so it fits nicely. This is the little extension you don't have to use, or I didn't, which is nice. And then just one little zip tie. The struggle was just the zip tie, feeding it through. What I was able to do is just loosen like these 4 post screws enough to kind of flex the top, and I could get this top piece out, and that, you know, gave you a lot more access underneath, so that helped me be able to fish that up and zip tie that guy from the top and bottom. And you can see it here from underneath. Pretty clean. Nothing is hanging down in the way of suspension. You've got plenty of clearance to everything, so not as challenging as I thought for these electronics, or I'm getting better at fishing these guys in. One thing that I did on this one, as I did on a couple of other ones, is clipped off a little the shrink tube on the Lizard Pro to allow you to fold the wires back in the opposite direction. It actually makes it a little thinner, so it just helped out, and it gave me a little more length on the cords to fish them up. But I think now I want to get a battery in this guy, put one of these 3S in here, and then I'll pop it up on a stand, and we'll take a look at the 30% overdrive. Okay, here we are, got the tires taped, ready for the overdrive test, and got the 3S brick in there. You can see it's pinched between the roof, just a friction fit right here. I can also slide it more forward till it hits this top tray for a little more forward bias. But you know, it's only taking up half of the width. I'll show you that a little more in a second. But let's take a quick look at this 30% overdrive from Mofo Rc. Wow. So about 5 rotations, it looks like, to bring it back. So I did notice, just testing it, there is some wind up bind on flat surfaces, but it is, like I say, about 4 rotations, and it kind of unwinds, which is common with overdrive because you're spinning at different rates. But hopefully this 050 can motor Torque Beast will be able to handle that little bit of bind. I don't know if I'd want to do this on a stock 030 can. I think the brushless motors, it's not a problem for them at all, but there you go, from slow to fast. So let's take a little closer look here at this battery mounting. So I'll show you here. So you can see it's only on 1/2 of this tray, and it can slide forward, and it's still under the back, and the wires are basically pinched under there. I don't have any spare Velcro straps, so everything right now is just going to friction fit in here So I may run this back pinched a little tighter to start with. But a lot of options there for batteries on that tray, so that's nice for this chassis. So I think the final thing is probably get this on the scales and kind of see where we ended up on weight. All right, here we are zeroed out, so let's get this guy on here. So this is in grams, we'll let it settle. So 5644, so good front bias, could always be better. So being able to ride a 2S battery more in this position would help that weight bias, probably a percentage. So I'm going to flip over to ounces, 15.6 ounces. So not too bad. I wonder what this thing weighs without the battery. Here we are without the battery. So 14.6 ounces. We kept the same ratio, at least with using that little battery. So we'll flip back to grams. So 414.2. So not a big weight difference with this little guy. A little. So on its own, 414.4 with 5644. So that's how she sits. So pretty happy with that. I think moving forward, I'm going to look at some tuning, potentially shock positions, maybe trying to drop it a little bit with some limiting straps. But that's something I think I'll get into in a future build episode. Well, you knew I had to do it. I had to get a comparison shot, a little flex shot action here. The original Mad Max build on the left, the updated version on the right, which I guess needs a unique name. Definitely looks a little more Rift-esque, especially with these tires. But yeah, I just wanted to kind of get out this original one here at the end, take a quick look. Of course, the new one sits up a little bit higher, for sure, suspension-wise. This one has a +4 axle on the front in addition to the Treal hex extenders. This just has the hex extenders all the way around, so it's a little narrower at the front. So that's one thing I was noticing. I might want to widen the track a little on this, but I'm just going to see how it performs. The wheelbase on these guys ended up being basically exactly the same. So Gladiator, and then this is deadbolt rear up front and Jeep rear in the rear. So those basically end up being the same. It's just where this transmission sits in relation to your tires is a little different. But I gotta say, I'm pretty happy with how this turned out. Like I say, I can play with limiters, and you know, it's got potential to get basically as low as this one, if not lower. I don't think I'm going to go that low with it since it's not as top heavy and it's not sitting extremely high. I think really the thing to do now is to get it out, put a battery in it, test it, and just see what the base point is here. And then I've got shock adjustments, limit straps to look at. Probably done with the weight tuning, but we'll see. It always depends on getting it out and driving it. So anyways, I hope you enjoyed, maybe you learned something. If you're gonna embark on building one of these little carbon fiber buggies, especially if you're gonna stretch the front end, this will help you. There's probably not a whole lot of ways to do that other than something similar to this. But until next time, thanks for watching.